The sky isn't black. It's a bruised electric purple, and my car battery is down to 11 volts. If you can hear this in the ruins of Des Moines, I'm broadcasting on 104.3 FM from a basement in the East Village, and the world we knew ended 92 seconds after the first flare hit.
I can hear the high-voltage transformers down the street literally melting into the pavement right now.
The silence out there is heavier than any noise I've ever heard. It's 2:14 a.m., October 14th, and this is the last frequency. I remember when the first warning came from the Space Weather Prediction Center, but we all thought it was just another solar cycle. Then the northern lights started showing up in Florida, and the power grid just gave up. I watched the street lights pop one by one, like someone was walking down the block with a hammer. Now I'm just waiting for the battery to die and the radio to go cold. It started with a flicker, a tiny glitch on the television that nobody bothered to report until the satellites started falling. They said it was a G5 class storm, the kind of event that happens once a century, but the math was wrong. It was much, much worse. When the Carrington event hit in 1859, it just burned some telegraph wires and shocked a few operators. But we've built a world out of glass and copper that can't handle this kind of fire from the sun. The ground itself is alive with electricity now, currents flowing through the soil and into the very foundations of our homes. I saw a man try to start his truck, and the entire engine block just fused together in a shower of sparks. There's no help coming, because there's no way to call for it. The ionosphere is so charged that even the emergency frequencies are mostly static. I'm holding on to this microphone like it's a lifeline, even though I know the transmitter is overheating as the surge continues to pulse through the lines. My friend Elias called me from Chicago just before the towers went dark, and he said the sky was glowing so bright he could read a book in the middle of the night. He didn't sound scared. He sounded tired, like he knew the clock had finally run out for all of us. I wonder if he's still out there, or if the city just swallowed him whole when the water pumps failed. You don't realize how much you depend on the hum of the world until it stops, and now the only sound is the wind and the occasional crackle of a transformer dying a slow death. They told us the National Public Warning System would hold, that the hardened radio stations would keep us informed, but I haven't heard a government voice in 6 hours. It's just us now, the survivors on the low-wattage bands, trying to figure out how to live in a world without a heartbeat. If you have a hand-crank radio, keep turning it, because once these batteries are gone, the darkness is going to be absolute. I've got a stack of paper maps and a gallon of water, and I'm realizing that everything I thought mattered is just plastic junk now. The sun is a star, and we forgot that stars don't care about our stock markets or our cell phone towers. We're just a blue marble sitting too close to a furnace that just turned up the heat. I'm gonna stay on as long as the needle stays in the green, but the smell of ozone is getting stronger in here. Keep your eyes on the horizon, but don't look at the sky if it starts to shimmer again. It's not a show, it's the end of the line. We've been through dark times before, but never a darkness this quiet, and never one this permanent. I'll be here at the top of every hour until the signal fades into the static for good. This is 104.3, the last frequency in the dark. Signing off for now. Stay warm, stay hidden, and keep listening. It's 3:42 a.m., and the air here in the studio feels electric, like a thunderstorm that refuses to break. I can hear the hum in the walls. That's the GICs, geomagnetically induced currents, crawling through the ground, searching for a way into the copper. They don't just trip a breaker, they melt the very heart of the grid. If you're seeing sparks from your outlets, pull the main switch now. Don't wait for the city to do it. NASA warned us about this years ago. They looked back at 1859, the year Richard Carrington saw 2 patches of intense white light on the sun. Back then, it just set telegraph papers on fire and gave operators shocks.
But we don't live in a world of telegraphs anymore. We live in a world of delicate microchips and high-voltage transformers that take years to manufacture and even longer to replace.
I remember reading a report from the USGS. They said a major storm could drain the electrical grid by inducing currents that literally cook the copper windings inside those massive transformers. You've seen them, those giant gray boxes at the substations. They are the backbone of everything. If those melt, there is no turning the power back on. There is only waiting for a supply chain that no longer exists.
The NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center has a scale for this, just like hurricanes. They call it the G scale. We just hit G5. That's the extreme level. At G5, the ionosphere is so disturbed that the very air above us becomes a conductor. It's not just the lights going out, it's the satellite navigation failing. GPS is gone. Think about the planes in the air right now, flying blind over the Atlantic. We had a warning shot in 1989. Up in Quebec, the whole grid collapsed in just 92 seconds. 6 million people plunged into the dark before they could even reach for a flashlight. It happened because the ground in that region is made of rock that doesn't conduct electricity well, so the solar storm forced all that energy into the power lines instead. That was a minor storm compared to what's hitting us now.
I'm looking at my phone, or what's left of the signal. The Integrated Public Alert and Warning System, IPAWS, sent out one final burst about 20 minutes ago. Then the towers went silent. FEMA designed these systems to withstand a lot, but a direct hit from a coronal mass ejection is like trying to stop a tidal wave with a screen door. The backbone of our telecommunications is just brittle. The Department of Homeland Security has been running drills for a high-altitude EMP for years, but the sun provides a natural version that is just as deadly. A geomagnetic disturbance flows through the ground, entering the grid through the grounded neutrals of those big transformers. It's a silent, invisible surge. You won't hear it coming until the transformer behind your house explodes like a localized sun. Back in 2012, we almost lost it all. A massive solar superstorm missed Earth by only 9 days. If it had hit, analysts say the economic cost would have been over $2 trillion. We got lucky then. We spent 10 years talking about hardening the grid, but talking doesn't move lead and steel. We traded our safety for convenience, and tonight, the bill is finally due. I'm broadcasting through a primary entry point station. These are the National Public Warning System sites. We're supposed to be hardened against this. We have the fuel, we have the shielding, but I can hear the signal degrading. The radiation from the upper atmosphere is chewing through the radio waves. If I start to sound like I'm underwater, it's because the very air is fighting the transmission. My friend Yusuf was a lineman in Chicago. He called me right before the lines went down. He said the hum coming off the high-tension wires was a sound he'd never heard, a low, vibrating growl that made his teeth ache. He saw the sky turn a deep, bruised purple, even that far south. He told me he was headed home to be with his kids. I hope he made it before the traffic lights died. The scariest part isn't the dark, it's the silence. No refrigerators humming, no distant highway noise, no planes overhead. Just the wind and the sound of my own breath. NERC, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, has standards for these disturbances. But standards are just words on paper when the sun decides to throw 1 billion tons of plasma our way. We are at the mercy of physics now. If you have a hand crank radio, keep it close. The digital stuff, the smart speakers, the mesh networks, they're paperweights now. We're going back to the basics. Find a paper map. Locate the nearest water source that doesn't require an electric pump. This isn't a weekend outage. This is a total reset of the clock. We're living in the 1800s again, but without the horses. In the ionosphere, the chaos is absolute. The signals from GPS satellites are being scattered like light through a prism. Aviation is grounded. Maritime transport is blind. If you're out on the water, look for the stars, if the aurora lets you see them. The high-tech world we built is a house of cards, and the sun just blew the doors off. I've got a car battery wired to this transmitter. It's a crude setup. something I rigged up when the main generator started smoking. The acid smell is sharp, but it's keeping us alive. For how long? I don't know. Maybe an hour, maybe 3. When this battery dies, this frequency goes with it. I'm talking to a ghost world now, hoping someone is on the other end. The reports from the coast were the last to come in. They said the sky wasn't just green, it was red, like blood. That's a sign of a truly deep penetration of solar particles. It means the magnetosphere is buckled. When the sky turns red, you know the shield is failing. It's beautiful, in a way. The most beautiful thing you'll ever see, right before the world stops working. I think about the people in the elevators, the people in the hospitals. The backup generators are supposed to kick in, but those rely on sensitive electronics too. If the surge was high enough, even the backups are fried. We spend so much time worrying about hackers and wars, but we forgot that we live in the atmosphere of a volatile star. We're just ants on a hot rock. There's a flickering light coming from the street. Someone's using a flare. It's a desperate kind of light. It reminds me that we aren't meant for the dark. We're creatures of fire and light. And now that our artificial suns have been snuffed out, we have to find that fire in each other. If you have a neighbor who's alone, knock on their door. Use your voice. It's the only thing that still works. I'm hearing reports, or maybe they're just rumors now, that the water pressure is dropping. Most city pumps are electric. Without the grid, the tower's empty, and then the taps go dry. If you have a tub, fill it now. Fill every bottle, every jar. Water is going to be more valuable than gold by sunrise. Don't wait for a government announcement. There won't be one. The irony isn't lost on me. We spent billions on 5G, on cloud computing, on the Internet of Things. And here I am, using a technology from the 1920s to tell you that the modern world is over. The analog stuff, the old vacuum tubes, the copper wire, the hand-cranked gears, that's what survives. The future wasn't built to last, it was built to be fast. And it just ran out of road. I'm going to take a moment to breathe. The air in here is getting heavy. I'll be back in 10 minutes with whatever news I can scavenge from the shortwave bands. If you're out there, Aisha, I'm still here. I'm still talking. To everyone else, keep your radios tuned to 104.3. The frequency is weak, but it's still ours. Don't let the silence win. The silence on the shortwave bands is the most terrifying part. Usually you can hear a dozen languages humming through the static, but now it's just a flat, dead hiss. It means the ionosphere is so disturbed that radio waves can't bounce back to Earth. We are effectively trapped in our own small bubbles of darkness. I'm checking the battery. 11.8 volts. It's dropping faster than I expected. The cold must be draining it. In 1859, the world got its first real warning. Richard Carrington, an amateur astronomer, saw 2 patches of intense white light on the sun. Within hours, the Earth's magnetic field was in a frenzy. Telegraph operators back then reported sparks flying from their machines. Some even found they could send messages with the batteries disconnected. The air itself was charged with electricity. That was the Carrington event, the gold standard for solar disasters. Back in 1859, a fire in a telegraph office was a tragedy, but it wasn't the end of civilization. They had horses, wood stoves, and paper ledgers. They didn't have a grid. Today, we've built a global nervous system made of copper and silicon. NASA says that if a Carrington-class storm hit us now, the economic cost in the first year alone would exceed $2 trillion. We aren't just losing lights, we are losing the ability to sustain life in cities. The real killers are the high-voltage transformers. These things are the size of houses and weigh hundreds of tons. They are the heart of the power grid, stepping up voltage for long-distance travel. But they are vulnerable to geomagnetically induced currents. These currents flow through the ground and enter the transformers through their grounded neutrals. Once inside, they melt the copper windings. You can't just go to the store and buy a new one. They take months to build. I remember reading a report from the USGS. They explained how the very ground beneath us becomes a conductor during these storms.
Depending on the geology, some areas are hit much harder than others. If you live on a bed of igneous rock, the current can't flow through the earth, so it jumps into the power lines instead. It's like the planet itself is trying to shunt the sun's energy into our living rooms.
In March of 1989, Quebec became the canary in the coal mine. A geomagnetic storm hit, and in less than 92 seconds, the entire Hydro-Quebec grid collapsed. 6 million people were plunged into the dark. It happened so fast, the engineers didn't even have time to react. That was a relatively mild storm compared to what we're facing tonight. If 92 seconds can take down a province, what does a full-scale superstorm do to a continent? We almost lost it all in 2012. A massive solar superstorm, every bit as big as the Carrington event, tore through Earth's orbit. If it had happened just 1 week earlier, it would have hit us head on. Analysts say we'd still be picking up the pieces today. We dodged a bullet that time, but the sun doesn't stop firing. It's a game of celestial roulette. And tonight, our number finally came up. The NOAA uses a G scale to measure these storms, from G1 to G5. A G5 is extreme. That's where we are now. At G5, they warn of complete grid collapse and major damage to transformers. This isn't just a lights-out situation. It's a hardware destruction situation. The very wires in your walls could be humming right now. If you smell ozone or burning plastic, get away from the outlets. The sun is inside the house. I'm getting a signal on the emergency frequency, but it's just a loop. It's the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System, or IPAWS. It's supposed to be the backbone of our national defense, sending alerts to every phone and radio. But the cellular towers are mostly dead, and the digital relays are fried. The high-tech warning system is screaming into a void. Only the old analog stations, the primary entry points, are still standing. I've heard that some of the primary entry point stations are built to survive an EMP. They have shielded rooms and massive diesel reserves. If you can find a signal that sounds clear and professional, that's where the government is. But here on 104.3, it's just me and this car battery. I don't have a lead line room. I just have a microphone and the truth. No one is coming to help for a long, long time. The Department of Homeland Security has been worried about this for years. They released strategies on how to protect the grid from EMPs and solar storms. They knew that telecommunications backbone was the most fragile part. But how do you shield 1 million miles of wire? You can't. You just pray the sun stays quiet. Tonight, those prayers went unanswered. The backbone isn't just broken, it's shattered into 1 billion pieces. I can hear the wind picking up outside. Or maybe it's not wind. Maybe it's the sound of a city realizing that the food isn't coming. Most grocery stores only have 3 days of supplies on the shelves. Without the internet, the just-in-time delivery system vanishes. The trucks aren't moving because the GPS is down, and the gas pumps don't work without electricity. The clock is ticking on every pantry in this town. If you're listening in a car, keep the engine running if you need the heater, but watch your fuel. When that tank is empty, that's it. There's no refilling until the pumps have power. And don't trust your GPS. The satellites are still up there, but the ionosphere is so thick with solar particles that the timing signals are being bent and delayed. Your map might say you're on the road, but you could be heading into a ditch. I wonder about the people who were in the middle of a flight when the storm hit. Modern avionics are shielded to a point, but a G5 storm creates an environment that even the best engineers didn't fully account for. Navigation becomes a guessing game. High-altitude radiation levels spike. I hope they made it down. I hope there were enough flashlights and enough runway left for them to see the ground. There's a strange hum coming from the walls of this studio. It's a low-frequency vibration, like a giant cat purring. It's the GICs, the induced currents, vibrating the metal in the building. It's a physical reminder that the energy of a star is currently flowing through our architecture. It feels like the building is alive. Or maybe it feels like it's being electrocuted in slow motion. I had a caller earlier, Yusuf, from the north side. He said he saw the transformers on the poles exploding one by one, like a string of firecrackers. He said the light was so bright it turned the night into noon for a split second. Then, total darkness.
No street lights, no porch lights, nothing. That's the sound of the 21st century ending, not with a bang, but with a series of pops and a lot of smoke. We take the grid for granted. We think of it like the weather, always there, always the same. But the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, NERC, has been warning for years that our transformers are a single point of failure. We don't have spares sitting in warehouses. They are custom built, one at a time. If we lose 100 of them at once, we're not looking at a blackout. We're looking at a blackout that lasts years. Think about what that means. No refrigeration, no water treatment, no heating in the winter or cooling in the summer. We are being pushed back to the 1800s, but we don't have the skills our ancestors had. We don't know how to live without the hum. I can hear my own heartbeat in this studio because the hum is gone. It's the loudest thing I've ever heard. I'm looking at a photo of my family on the desk. They're 3 states away. I tried to call, but the network is a ghost. I have to believe they're okay. I have to believe they found the flashlights and the old camping stove. That's all we have now, belief and the sound of this radio. If you're listening and you're scared, just know you aren't the only one. We're all in the dark together. The battery is at 11.6. The signal is going to start drifting soon. I'm going to play a few minutes of static. Maybe you can hear something in it that I can't. If there are any other stations out there, any other voices, please, signal back. This is 104.3 FM, the last frequency in the valley. We are still here. We are still breathing. For now. The battery's voltage is dropping faster now. I can feel the cold creeping in from the edges of the room. It's funny how we used to complain about the heat from the old server racks, but now I'd give anything for that electronic warmth. Outside, the sky is doing things it shouldn't. The aurora has moved south, draping the skyline in a sickly, flickering neon green that makes the shadows of the skyscrapers look like long, reaching fingers. I remember reading a report from the USGS about how these solar storms actually work. It isn't just the air that's charged. The ground itself becomes a conductor. The currents flow through the rock and soil, looking for the path of least resistance. Usually that path is our buried pipelines and the grounded neutrals of our massive high-voltage transformers. We built a giant antenna across the continent and called it a power grid. Back in 1989, Quebec learned this lesson in less than 2 minutes. A solar storm hit, and in just 92 seconds, the entire Hydro-Quebec grid collapsed. 6 million people were plunged into the dark. It wasn't a slow failure. It was a domino effect that the engineers couldn't stop. They watched the dials drop and the breakers trip, and then there was just silence. That was just a warning shot compared to what's hitting us now. The Carrington event of 1859 is our only real yardstick for this. Back then, the only technology we had was the telegraph. Operators reported sparks flying from their equipment. Some even found they could send messages with the batteries disconnected, powered entirely by the electricity in the air. If that happened today, in a world held together by microchips and fiber optics, the sparks wouldn't just be on telegraph keys. They'd be in our pockets. NASA scientists have been watching the sun for decades, knowing this day was coming. In 2012, a superstorm nearly identical to the Carrington event tore across Earth's orbit. We missed it by just 9 days. If the sun had erupted a week earlier, we wouldn't be sitting here in the dark today. We would have been living in the ruins for the last 12 years. Analysts estimated the cost would have topped $2 trillion. I'm looking at the IPAWS manual I kept in the top drawer. The Integrated Public Alert and Warning System was supposed to be our shield. It's designed to hit every phone, every radio, and every TV at once. But IPAWS relies on the very backbone that's currently melting. If the cell towers can't talk to the satellites, and the satellites are blinded by the sun, the warning never leaves the station. The system is only as loud as its weakest wire. There is a plan, or at least there was one. The National Public Warning System uses primary entry point stations. These are radio stations like this one, hardened against EMPs, with their own fuel and reinforced antennas. We were supposed to be the lighthouse in the storm. But even a lighthouse needs a lamp. My lamp
is a lead-acid battery I pulled out of a truck in the parking lot 3 hours ago. I heard a voice on the shortwave earlier, a guy named Hector, broadcasting from a basement in Omaha. He sounded calm, which was the scariest part. He said the water pressure in his neighborhood just died. When the pumps lose power, the towers drain, and then the pipes go dry. Without water, a city isn't a home anymore. It's just a collection of hot, thirsty rooms. Keep your tubs filled if you still have a flow. The Department of Homeland Security has warned about high-altitude EMPs for years. While this is a solar event, the effect on our sensitive electronics is much the same. A solar storm is like a slow-motion EMP, a continental-scale surge that finds every weak link in the telecommunications backbone. It's not just the big stuff. It's the tiny circuits in your microwave, your car's ignition, and the hospital's heart monitors. I keep thinking about the GPS satellites. They sit 20,000 kilometers up, bathed in the full force of the solar wind. They don't have the atmosphere to protect them. When the ionosphere gets turbulent, the signals get scrambled. Aviation and maritime transport rely on that precision. Right now, there are ships in the middle of the ocean and planes in the sky that are effectively blind, sailing by stars they can't see through the aurora. The NERC standards were supposed to protect the transformers. They have these things called GIC blocking devices, but they aren't everywhere. Most of the grid is still vulnerable. Once a transformer's copper windings melt, it's over. You can't just patch it. You have to replace the whole multi-ton unit. And since we don't make them here in large numbers anymore, the lead time for a new one could be months or years. It's midnight now. The sky isn't black. It's a bruised purple. I can hear people shouting down on the street. They aren't angry yet, just confused. They're holding their phones up to the sky, trying to get a signal that isn't there. It's like they're holding up tiny mirrors, hoping to see a world that has already vanished. They don't realize that the silence is the new permanent resident of this city. I'm thinking about the grocery stores. In a world of just-in-time delivery, there's only about 3 days of food on the shelves. Without the digital networks to track inventory or the fuel pumps to keep the trucks moving, those shelves will be bare by Thursday. If you have canned goods, hide them. If you have seeds, keep them dry. The era of the supermarket ended at sundown. There's a strange beauty to it, if you can forget the fear. With all the city lights dead, the stars are brighter than I've ever seen them. The Milky Way is a jagged scar across the sky. It reminds you how small we are. We built this glittering civilization on the back of a tamed lightning bolt, and the sun just reminded us that the lightning was never really ours to keep. I had a friend, Aisha, who worked for the power company. She used to tell me that the grid was the most complex machine ever built by man. Millions of miles of wire, all perfectly synchronized to the same heartbeat. One massive surge from the sun is like a heart attack for the planet. The synchronization is gone. The heartbeat has stopped. And I don't think there's a defibrillator big enough to jumpstart it. If you're hearing this, you're the lucky one. You have a radio that works. You have a battery that isn't dead. You have a connection to another human soul. Stay off the main roads. The traffic jams are becoming permanent graveyards for cars with fried computers. Stick to the back paths. Use paper maps if you have them. The old ways are the only ways that still work tonight. The NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center has officially classified this as a G5 extreme storm. That's the highest their scale goes. It means widespread voltage control problems and protective system failures are expected. In plain English, it means the safety switches are melting along with the wires they were supposed to protect. We are in uncharted territory. No one alive has seen a storm this strong hit a world this connected. I'm going to try to conserve the battery. I'll be back on the air at the top of the hour, every hour, for as long as this truck battery holds out. My name is Elias Thorne. I'm just a guy in a booth, but I'm not leaving until the air goes dead. If you're out there, Freya, I'm waiting for you at the station. To everyone else, keep your eyes on the horizon. and your ears on this frequency. The air is getting thinner, or maybe that's just my nerves. The smell of ozone is everywhere, that sharp, metallic scent you get after a lightning strike. It's the smell of the atmosphere being cooked by the sun. It makes your teeth ache. It makes you want to run, but there's nowhere to go where the sky isn't watching. We are all under the same sun, and tonight the sun is angry. Remember what I said about the water. If the pressure is still there, fill everything, sinks, buckets, even the washing machine. We don't know when the pumps will breathe again. And stay together. The dark is a lot smaller when you aren't in it alone. This is 104.3 FM, the last frequency. We are still here. We are still broadcasting. God bless the survivors. The silence isn't just in the airwaves, it's in the water pipes too. Most municipal water systems rely on electric pumps to maintain pressure and move water from reservoirs to your tap. Without the grid, those pumps are just heavy pieces of scrap metal. If you didn't fill your bathtub in the first hour, you're already looking at a crisis. A city without water is a city that has about 48 hours before the panic turns into something much darker. I remember reading a report from the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, or NERC. They've known about the vulnerability of our transformers to these geomagnetically induced currents for years. These currents flow through the ground, seeking the path of least resistance, which happens to be the grounded neutrals of our high-voltage transformers. Once they enter, they saturate the core, causing the copper windings to literally melt under the heat. It's not just about losing your lights, it's about losing the ability to fix them. These massive transformers aren't something you can just pick up at a hardware store. They are custom-built, weighing hundreds of tons, and often take 18 to 24 months to manufacture and ship. If a solar storm wipes out 100 of them across the country at once, we aren't looking at a blackout. We are looking at a multi-year technological dark age. Back in 1989, the people of Quebec got a small taste of this reality. A geomagnetic storm hit the Earth and collapsed their entire power grid in just 92 seconds. 6 million people were plunged into the cold in less time than it takes to boil a kettle. That was a warning shot from the sun, but we were too busy building a world that was even more dependent on the very wires that failed them. The speed of it is what haunts me. NASA analysts looked at a solar superstorm that narrowly missed us in 2012. If that flare had been aimed just a few degrees differently, it would have hit Earth with the force of 1,000 suns. They estimated the economic impact would have exceeded $2 trillion. But you can't put a price on the moment a mother realizes the hospital ventilators have stopped and the backup generators won't start. I just got a garbled message on the shortwave from a guy named Yusuf in Chicago. He says the sky there is glowing a deep blood red. That's the oxygen in the upper atmosphere being ionized by the solar particles. It happened during the Carrington event in 1859, too. Back then, the aurora was so bright that miners in the Rockies woke up and started cooking breakfast, thinking it was dawn. Only tonight, that red glow means the end of the digital world. In 1859, the only thing that could break was the telegraph. Operators reported sparks flying from their equipment, setting their desks on fire. Some even found they could send messages with the batteries disconnected, powered entirely by the electricity in the air. Today, we don't have telegraphs, we have microchips. And microchips are far more fragile than a copper wire in a wooden box. We've built a glass civilization in a hailstone storm. I'm looking at my watch. It's a mechanical one, the kind you have to wind every morning. It's the only thing in this room that I know is telling the truth. The GPS satellites are likely failing as we speak. The ionosphere is so disturbed that the timing signals those satellites send are getting scrambled. Without GPS, planes can't land safely. Ships are lost at sea, and the very foundation of our global logistics is gone. The Department of Homeland Security has a strategy for this, or at least they did on paper. They talk about protecting the telecommunications backbone from high-altitude electromagnetic pulses and solar disturbances. But a strategy is just words in a PDF if the transformers are already smoking. You can't download a backup for the physical world. When the hardware dies, the software, and everything we stored in the cloud, just evaporates into the ether.
I'm hearing reports of islanding, where small pockets of the grid try to stay alive by disconnecting from the main body. It's a desperate move. If they don't balance the load perfectly, the frequency oscillates and the whole thing trips anyway. It's like trying to keep a single candle lit in a hurricane. Most of the primary entry point radio stations are supposed to have hardened equipment for this. I hope to God they're still out there, somewhere in the dark.
If you're listening in your car, be careful. Newer models are basically computers on wheels. If the surge was strong enough, your engine control unit might be fried. If your car died while you were driving, you're now an obstacle. Get it off the road if you can move it. The last thing we need is for the emergency routes to be blocked by thousands of dead SUVs. If you have an old diesel or a pre-1970s ride, you might be the only ones moving. There's a guy named Hector who used to call into my show every Friday. He was a prepper, and I used to tease him about his buckets of freeze-dried rice. I'm not laughing now. Hector, if you're listening, I hope you're tucked away in that cabin of yours. The rest of us are realizing how thin the veneer of civilization really is. It's only as thick as the insulation on a power line. And tonight, that insulation is burning away.
The Integrated Public Alert and Warning System, or IPAWS, was supposed to keep us informed. It's the system that sends those loud blares to your phone. But IPAWS relies on the cellular networks and the internet backbone. When the towers lose power and the fiber optic repeaters fail, the system goes silent. That's why I'm here. Old-school AM/FM radio is the only thing that can jump the gap when the digital bridge collapses. Think about the cooling pools at the nuclear plants. They need electricity to keep the pumps running, to keep the spent fuel rods from overheating. They have backup generators, sure, but those generators need fuel, and fuel needs pumps, and pumps need, well, you see the cycle. The disaster dominoes are falling, and each one is heavier than the last. We have to hope the engineers on site are brave enough to stay at their posts.
I'm looking at my signal meter. It's fluctuating. The atmosphere is so charged that the radio waves are bouncing in ways they aren't supposed to. I might be reaching people 3 states away, or I might not be reaching the end of the block. It's like shouting into a storm. But I'll keep shouting, because as long as there's a voice on the air, there's a reason not to give up. This is the last frequency, and we aren't done yet. I wonder what the people on the International Space Station are seeing right now. From up there, the Earth must look like a dying ember. The great webs of light that define our continents are blinking out, one city at a time. They're safe from the ground currents, but they're sitting ducks for the solar radiation. They are the ultimate survivors, watching the world they left behind fall into a shadow they can't escape. The irony isn't lost on me. We spent billions building a smart grid, connecting every toaster and every thermostat to the web. We made the system more efficient, but we also made it more fragile. A dumb grid from the 1950s might have survived this better. It was heavy, clunky, and manual. Now, everything is automated, which means when the brain gets fried, the body doesn't know how to breathe on its own. I am hearing a low hum coming from the walls of the studio. It's the building itself picking up the induced current from the ground. It's a ghost in the machine. It feels like the earth is vibrating, trying to shed all the copper and steel we've wrapped around it. If you feel that hum in your house, stay away from the appliances. Unplug what you can. But honestly, if it's humming, the damage is probably already done. We've been here before, in a way. Our ancestors lived for thousands of years without a single watt of electricity. They followed the sun. They didn't try to outshine it. We've forgotten how to live by the seasons and the daylight. We've forgotten how to talk to our neighbors without a screen in between us. Maybe this is the Great Reset. A very painful, very dark reset. But the sun will rise tomorrow, even if the lights don't. My car battery is holding steady for now, but the voltage is dropping. I can feel the signal weakening. If you lose me, don't stop searching the dial. There are others like me, hidden in basements and garages, refuse to let the silence win. Keep your radios low to save your own batteries. Listen for the voices and the static.
We are the ghosts of the old world, trying to guide you into the new one. I'm looking out the reinforced glass of the studio window, and the sky over the city is a color I can't name. It's a deep, bruised purple streaked with neon green. This is the G5 level geomagnetic storm that the NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center warned about. They call it extreme. At this level, the Earth's magnetic field doesn't just bend, it breaks, allowing the sun's fury to pour directly into our atmosphere. Back in 1989, a storm much smaller than this one hit the Hydro-Quebec grid. In just 92 seconds, the entire system collapsed. 6 million people were plunged into darkness before they could even reach for a flashlight. That was a warning shot from the sun. Today, we aren't just looking at one province in Canada going dark. We are looking at the entire North American continent losing its pulse. The science behind this is simple and terrifying. When the solar wind hits our magnetic field, it creates geomagnetically induced currents, or GICs. These currents don't stay in the air. They flow through the ground, seeking the path of least resistance. They find our power lines, our pipelines, and the grounded neutrals of our massive high-voltage transformers. They enter the grid from below, and the grid wasn't built to handle a surge from the Earth itself. I remember reading a report from the U.S. Geological Survey. They warned that a major storm could melt the copper windings of these transformers. These aren't parts you can just pick up at a hardware store. They weigh hundreds of tons. They are custom-built and take months, sometimes years, to manufacture and ship. If enough of them melt tonight, the lights won't just be off for a week. They could be off for a decade. The silence is the worst part. Usually, you can hear the city, the distant hum of the highway, the buzz of streetlights. Now it's just a series of isolated islands. We almost learned this lesson in 2012. A solar superstorm, every bit as powerful as the one that hit in 1859, tore through Earth's orbit. It missed us by just 9 days. If the sun had erupted a week earlier, we would have been hit by a blast that analysts say would have cost the global economy over $2 trillion. We dodged a bullet then. Tonight, the bullet finally found its mark. Think back to the Carrington event of 1859. That was the gold standard for solar disasters. Back then, the only high-tech system we had was the telegraph. The wires sparked so much they set telegraph offices on fire. Some operators found they could disconnect their batteries and keep sending messages using only the electricity provided by the storm itself. The sky was so bright that birds started singing at midnight, thinking it was dawn. If you're trying to use your GPS to navigate out of the city, stop. The ionospheric disturbances caused by these flares have effectively blinded the satellite systems. The National Coordination Office for Space-Based Positioning warned that space weather can disrupt aviation and maritime transport. Planes are being grounded because they can't trust their coordinates. Ships are drifting. We are back to using paper maps and the stars, if the aurora lets you see them. FEMA has a system called the National Public Warning System. It's a network of primary entry point radio stations. These stations are hardened. They have lead shielding, massive fuel reserves, and specialized antennas designed to survive a nuclear blast or a solar superstorm. I'm not one of those stations. I'm just a guy with a car battery and a stubborn streak. But if the big stations are still out there, they are the only ones holding the line. I just lost the signal from the station in the next county. They were broadcasting on 8:80 a.m. Now it's just a wall of white noise. It sounds like 1,000 snakes hissing at once. That's the sound of the sun eating the radio spectrum. When the E1 and E2 waves of a pulse hit, they strip the atmosphere of its ability to carry our voices. We are being pushed into a deep, dark silence, one frequency at a time. The North American Electric Reliability Corporation, or NERC, has been trying to get utilities to prepare for GICs for years. They knew the ground currents were a threat. They developed standards for grounded neutrals. But you can't protect every mile of wire. The grid is too big, too interconnected. It's like a giant spider web. You pull on one thread in Maine, and the whole thing shakes down in Florida. The interdependence is our downfall. If you have a hand crank radio, now is the time to use it. Save your batteries for the late night when the air might clear. Keep your electronics inside a metal box if you can. A microwave or a filing cabinet might offer some protection against the secondary surges. It sounds like paranoia, but in a world where the air itself is electrified, a little paranoia is a survival skill. We are witnesses to the end of the digital age. I'm hearing reports of fires in the rural areas. Not forest fires, but fires starting in the power substations themselves. The currents are so high, they are jumping the insulators and igniting the cooling oil in the transformers. It's a terrifying sight, a pillar of black smoke rising into a sky filled with dancing green lights. The very machines that gave us light are now burning like funeral pyres across the landscape. Water is going to be the next problem. Most city water systems rely on electric pumps to maintain pressure and fill the towers. When the pumps die, the pressure drops. Within 24 hours, the taps will run dry. If you haven't filled your bathtubs and every bottle you own, do it now. A solar storm doesn't just take away your Netflix, it takes away your ability to drink. It's a primitive threat in a modern world. I keep thinking about the hospital 3 blocks away. They have generators, but those generators are designed for short-term outages. They aren't meant to run for weeks. And the sensitive medical equipment, the ventilators, the monitors, they are all at risk from the electromagnetic noise. The doctors are going to have to make choices tonight that no one should ever have to make. The human cost of a solar storm is measured in heartbeats. The sun is 93 million miles away, yet it's reaching out and touching every part of our lives. We think of it as a constant, a friendly yellow ball in the sky. But the sun is a chaotic nuclear furnace. It doesn't care about our stock markets or our social media. Every few centuries, it lets out a burst of plasma that reminds us exactly where we sit in the food chain of the universe. We are very, very small. I've got a caller on the line. At least, I think I do. The line is so full of static I can barely hear him. He says he's in Omaha. He says the sky there is so bright he can read a newspaper in his backyard. That means the storm has pushed the auroral oval all the way down to the mid-latitudes. This isn't just a northern phenomenon anymore. The whole world is under the glow. Omaha, if you can hear me, stay inside. NASA's history records the Carrington event as the most intense geomagnetic storm ever documented. If that happens tonight, we are looking at a total reset of our technological infrastructure. The satellites that provide our timing signals, our banking data, and our communications are being bombarded by high-energy protons. Some will survive, but many will become multi-million-dollar pieces of space junk by morning. The sky is falling, literally and figuratively. My car battery is starting to bulge. The heat from the transmitter and the erratic charge from the air is taking its toll. I might only have another hour of broadcast left in me. I'm going to spend that time giving you whatever information I can scrape together. If you're listening, get your family together. Get your blankets. Get your candles. The long night is only just beginning, and we need to be ready for the cold that follows the light. There's a strange beauty to it, if you can forget the terror for a second. The way the curtains of light dance across the sky, shifting from blood red to emerald green. It's like the earth is putting on its finest clothes for its own funeral. But it's not a funeral. It's a transformation. We are being stripped of our gadgets, but we are being given back the stars. We just have to survive long enough to see them. I'm looking at the NOAA Space Weather Scale right now on a printout I grabbed before the printers died. We are currently at a G5, the extreme level. It's the highest category there is. According to the Space Weather Prediction Center, a G5 storm means complete grid collapse and major damage to transformers. This isn't just a power outage, it's a structural failure of the backbone of civilization. The scale doesn't go any higher, because at this point, there's nothing left to measure. Back in 1989, a storm much smaller than this one hit the Hydro-Quebec grid. It took only 92 seconds for the entire province to go dark. 6 million people lost power in less time than it takes to boil the kettle. That was a warning shot from the sun, but we didn't listen. We kept building the grid bigger,
longer, and more interconnected, making it a better antenna for these solar currents to find a home. The science of it is terrifyingly simple. When the solar wind hits our magnetic field, it creates geomagnetically induced currents, or GICs. These currents flow through the ground, seeking the path of least resistance. They find it in our power lines. They enter the grid through the grounded neutrals of massive transformers, flowing like a ghost through the copper windings until the metal literally melts under the heat. You can't just flip a switch to fix a melted transformer. I remember reading a report from the North American Electric Reliability Corporation. They've known about this vulnerability for years. They call it a high-impact, low-frequency event. They knew that if the right storm hit, the GICs would saturate the magnetic cores of our transformers. Once that happens, the voltage stability of the entire continent vanishes. It's a house of cards, and the sun just blew the doors off the foundation. Think about the 2012 solar superstorm. NASA says it narrowly missed Earth by only a week. If that flare had erupted just a few days earlier, we would still be picking up the pieces today. Analysts estimated the economic cost would have exceeded $2 trillion. We dodged a bullet then, but our luck finally ran out tonight. The sun doesn't aim, it just fires in every direction, and eventually, your number comes up. The Department of Homeland Security has been warning about the impact of electromagnetic pulses for a long time. Whether it's from the sun or a high-altitude EMP, the result is the same: the destruction of the telecommunications backbone. Our fiber optics might be okay, but the electronic repeaters and the switches that make them work are incredibly sensitive. Without them, the internet is just a collection of dark glass cables buried in the dirt. I'm trying to keep this signal alive because I'm part of the National Public Warning System. This station is a primary entry point. We were supposed to be the ones who kept the government connected to the people. We have the shielded equipment and the hardened transmitters. But even the best shielding has its limits when the very air around the antenna is ionized. I'm shouting into a storm, hoping my voice finds a way through the static. The GPS satellites are likely the first to go. The ionospheric disturbances caused by the flare mess with the timing signals. Aviation and maritime transport rely on that precision. Right now, there are cargo ships in the middle of the Atlantic that don't know their exact position, and planes trying to navigate without their primary instruments. The sky is no longer a safe place to be when the magnets of the world start spinning out of control. I just lost my connection to the FEMA IPWAS feed. That's the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. It's the system that sends those loud blares to your cell phone. If that's gone, it means the cellular gateways are failing. The silence is spreading. It starts at the edges of the city and works its way in, block by block, as the backup batteries in the cell towers finally give up the ghost. I keep thinking about the telegraph operators in 1859. During the Carrington event, they reported that their machines were working even after they disconnected the batteries. The air was so charged with electricity that the wires were drawing power directly from the atmosphere. Some operators even got electric shocks from their keys, and the paper in the machines caught fire. Tonight, I feel that same electric hum in my teeth. It's the sound of the world changing. We've spent decades making our electronics smaller and faster, but smaller means more vulnerable. The transistors in your laptop are only a few nanometers wide. It doesn't take much of a surge to fry them. We traded durability for speed, and now we're paying the price. The old vacuum tubes in this transmitter might be the only reason I'm still talking to you. The old world had a thickness to it that we've lost. If you're in a city, the lack of streetlights is going to be the first thing that hits you. Total darkness is something most of us have never truly experienced. Without the light pollution, you'll see the Milky Way clearer than ever before, framed by the pulsing red of the aurora. It's a beautiful sight that signals the end of the world as we knew it. Don't wander out there. The darkness hides more than just the stars. I've heard rumors of martial law being declared in the capital, but who knows if the orders are even getting out? Without the radio and the internet, authority only extends as far as a man can shout. The local police are going to be overwhelmed. They're humans too. They have families to get home to, just like you. The social contract is held together by the thin thread of a working light bulb, and that thread just snapped. Food supply chains are the next domino. Most grocery stores only have 3 days of food on the shelves, and they rely on just-in-time delivery systems. Those systems need computers, and the trucks need fuel pumps that run on electricity. If the grid doesn't come back in 72 hours, the shelves will be empty, and they won't be getting refilled. If you have a garden, guard it. If you have a pantry, lock it. My friend Yusuf, a technician at the local plant, told me once that the biggest threat wasn't the initial surge, but the lack of spare parts. These massive high-voltage transformers aren't sitting in a warehouse. They are custom-built, often overseas, and take months to manufacture. If we lose 100 of them tonight, we aren't looking at a blackout of days. We are looking at a blackout of years, a permanent sunset for the industrial age. The atmosphere itself is expanding. The heat from the solar storm causes the upper layers of the air to swell outward. This creates extra drag on satellites in low Earth orbit. Some of them will literally be pulled out of the sky, burning up as they hit the denser air. It's a meteor shower of our own making. The very tools we use to map the world are being reclaimed by the gravity they tried to escape. I'm smelling something now. Ozone. It's that sharp, metallic scent you get after a lightning strike, but it's everywhere. The air is so energized that it's creating its own chemistry. It makes my skin crawl. It's a reminder that we live on a rock hurtling through a radioactive void, protected only by a thin magnetic shield that is currently being hammered like an anvil. We are at the mercy of the heavens. Remember that the sun has cycles. Every 11 years, it reaches a solar maximum, a period of peak activity. We've known this was coming. The astronomers saw the sunspots growing, massive dark patches larger than the Earth itself. They warned us that this cycle was going to be a violent one. But warning and preparing are two different things. We watched the storm gather for days, and we just hoped it would miss. In the rural areas, people are already breaking out the wood stoves and the oil lamps. The old ways are the only ways tonight. My grandfather used to say that progress is just a way of forgetting how to survive. I think we're all about to get a very fast education. If you can hear me, find your manual tools, find your paper maps. The digital world is gone, and the physical world is all that's left. The signal is starting to waver. The voltage from my car battery is dropping, and the transmitter is beginning to whine. I'm going to keep talking until the last electron leaves the wire. If this is the last thing you hear, know that you aren't alone. There are millions of us out here in the dark, all looking at the same sky, all waiting for the sun to calm down. Stay safe, stay warm, keep the frequency open. The silence isn't just local, it's planetary. Back in 2012, we almost faced this exact moment. A massive solar superstorm, a coronal mass ejection of historic proportions, tore through Earth's orbit. We missed it by only 9 days. If that eruption had occurred a week earlier, analysts estimate the economic impact would have exceeded $2 trillion. We were living on borrowed time, and tonight, the debt is finally being called in. I just lost contact with Yusuf. The line didn't just go dead, it screamed. That's the sound of geomagnetically induced currents, or GICs. These currents don't come from the power plant, they flow up from the ground itself. They enter the grid through the grounded neutrals of our massive transformers, turning the backbone of our civilization into a heating element that melts from the inside out. There is no switch to flip to stop the Earth from charging. If you're looking at the sky and seeing those shimmering curtains of green and red, don't be fooled by the beauty. That's a G5 level storm, the maximum rating on the NOAA Space Weather Scale. At this intensity, the geomagnetic disturbance is so violent that it can cause complete collapse of the power grid. It's not just a blackout, it's a physical destruction of the hardware we need to live. The aurora is the funeral shroud of the digital age. We've seen the warning shots before. In 1989, a solar storm hit the Hydro-Quebec grid. It didn't take hours or days to fail.
The entire system collapsed in less than 92 seconds. 6 million people were plunged into the cold and dark in the time it takes to boil a kettle. That was a localized event, a mere tremor compared to the earthquake we are feeling through the wires right now. The speed of the collapse is what kills. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, has spent years building the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. It was designed to reach every cell phone, every radio, and every television in the country simultaneously. But that system relies on a functioning telecommunications backbone. When the high-altitude electromagnetic pulse effects start frying the routers and the fiber optic repeaters, the loudest warning system in history becomes a hollow, silent shell. I'm looking at an old paper manual for the National Public Warning System. It mentions the primary entry point radio stations. These were designed to be the last line of defense, hardened facilities meant to keep broadcasting even during a nuclear war or a solar catastrophe. I'm hoping one of those stations is still out there, somewhere in the Midwest, manned by someone like me, refusing to let the airwaves go cold. It's not just the lights going out, it's the GPS satellites. Those bird-sized machines 20,000 miles up are getting hammered by ionospheric disturbances. Aviation and maritime transport rely on those signals for everything. Right now, pilots are flying blind, and ships are losing their way in the middle of the ocean. The invisible map we use to navigate the globe has been erased by the sun's fury. History has a way of repeating itself, but with higher stakes. In 1859, the Carrington event hit a world that ran on steam and ink. Telegraph systems failed, and some operators even reported their machines sparking fires and sending messages even after the batteries were disconnected. Today, we don't just use electricity for messages, we use it for water, for heat, and for the very heartbeat of our cities. The sparks this time won't just burn paper. I can hear the rhythm of the city changing. It's the sound of 10,000 backup generators kicking in, then sputtering out as their control boards fry. A modern generator is full of sensitive microchips. Unless they were shielded in a Faraday cage, they are just as vulnerable as your laptop. We've built a world out of glass and silicon, and the sun is throwing stones. The irony of our complexity is our downfall. Water is the silent crisis. Most city water towers rely on electric pumps to keep the pressure up. When the grid stays down for more than a few hours, the taps run dry. If you haven't filled your bathtub yet, do it now. Use every container you have. A human can go weeks without food, but only days without water. The clock is ticking, and the sun isn't showing any signs of calming down. The Department of Homeland Security has published strategies for this. They talk about protecting the homeland against high-altitude electromagnetic pulses and geomagnetic disturbances. They knew the vulnerability of the telecommunications backbone. But strategy is just words on a page until the transformers start exploding. We've spent trillions on defense against human enemies, but we left the back door open to the star we orbit every single day. I keep thinking about the supply chains. The North American Electric Reliability Corporation, or NERC, has standards for these disturbances. They know the GICs flow through the ground and enter the grid, but standards don't replace physical hardware. If the copper windings in a 500 kilovolt transformer melt, you can't just patch it, you have to replace it. And right now, there aren't enough spares in the entire hemisphere to fix what we've lost. The sky is a deep, bruised purple now. It's the color of a world that's being ionized. I've heard reports from ham radio operators that the ionosphere is so disturbed that signals are bouncing in ways they never should. They're picking up stations from across the globe, voices and languages they don't understand, all crying out for help. We are all shouting into a storm, hoping someone, somewhere, is still holding a receiver. Think about the hospitals. They have generators, yes, but for how long? And how many of those modern ventilators and monitors have survived the initial surge? The doctors are going back to basics: manual pulses, hand-pumped oxygen, and flashlights held between their teeth. We are moving backward in time, 1 hour for every minute the sun continues its tantrum.
The 20th century is slipping through our fingers like sand. In the darkness, the stars are brighter than I've ever seen them. Without the light pollution of the city, the Milky Way looks like a solid bridge across the heavens. It's beautiful in a terrifying way. It reminds you how small we are. We built these glowing hives of concrete and steel and thought we were masters of the earth. But the sun just gave us a reminder that we are just guests on a very fragile planet.
I'm checking the car battery again. The terminals are getting hot. I've got a few more hours, maybe. I'm thinking about the people out on the highways. Their cars stalled where they stood as the onboard computers fried. Thousands of people are stranded in the middle of nowhere, walking toward a home that might not have any heat or light when they get there. The roads are becoming graveyards of dead technology.
My neighbor, Imani, came by earlier. She brought over some canned peaches and a manual can opener. We didn't talk much. What is there to say? We just sat on the porch and watched the sky burn. That's the human element they don't put in the NASA reports. The way the disaster brings us together, even as it tears the world apart. We are rediscovering what it means to be a neighbor in the dark.
The economic impact is going to be the second wave. Without digital banking, your money is just a number on a server that no one can access. Credit cards are just pieces of plastic. Cash is king again, but only as long as people believe it has value. We are heading toward a barter economy faster than anyone predicted. If you have extra batteries or fuel, those are the new gold standard tonight. I've heard that some of the nuclear power plants have successfully entered a safe shutdown mode. That's the good news. The bad news is that they need off-site power to keep the cooling pools running. If the grid doesn't come back, they'll have to rely on their own diesel generators. It's a race against time to keep the cores cool while the world above them burns. The sun is testing every failsafe we ever built.
This is 104.3 FM, the last frequency still broadcasting in this sector. If you can hear this, you are the resistance. Not against a government or an army, but against the silence. Keep your radios tuned. Keep your spirits up. We are going into the long night, but the sun always rises, even if it's the thing that put us here. This is my voice, and I'm not going silent until the last spark dies. I'm looking at the signal strength meter on my console, and it's dancing like a heartbeat in a fever. The ionosphere is so charged right now that it's reflecting radio waves from thousands of miles away. I just heard a faint broadcast in French, then one in what sounded like Mandarin. The whole world is screaming into the void, but the wires that connect us are melting under the weight of the sun's anger. It's a global blackout, and we're all just islands in a sea of static.
Let's talk about the disaster dominoes. It starts with the high-voltage transformers. These things are the size of houses and weigh hundreds of tons. When the geomagnetically induced currents, or GICs, hit them, they don't just trip a breaker. The copper windings inside actually melt. Research from the USGS confirms that these currents drain the grid by saturating the magnetic cores of these massive machines. Once they go, you don't just flip a switch to bring them back. If you're lucky enough to have a car that still runs, don't count on the gas pumps. Those pumps are all electronic. No power means no fuel. And if you have a manual pump, you'll be fighting off 100 other people for every gallon. The Department of Homeland Security has warned that a continental-scale EMP or solar event could disable the entire telecommunications backbone. That means no cell service, no internet, and no way to coordinate a rescue. I remember reading about the 1989 event in Quebec. It was a warning we didn't heed. NASA recorded that the entire Hydro-Quebec grid collapsed in less than 92 seconds. 6 million people lost power in the blink of an eye because of a solar storm. That was a localized event. What we're facing tonight is the Carrington event of 1859 on steroids. Back then, it just burned telegraph paper. Today, it's burning the nervous system of our civilization. I've got a backup battery hooked up to this transmitter. It's a deep cycle marine battery I pulled from my boat. It's the only reason you can hear me. But even this has a shelf life. When the chemical reaction inside ends, this frequency goes silent. It makes you realize how much we rely on things we don't understand. We spend our lives staring at screens, never thinking about the invisible fire that powers them, or the fire from the sun that can kill them. The GPS satellites are likely the first to go. The National Coordination Office for Space-Based Positioning warns that ionospheric disturbances can completely disrupt satellite navigation. Think about the cargo ships in the middle of the ocean, the planes in the air, the automated systems that manage our supply chains. They're all blind now. We've built a world that requires a precise signal from space just to deliver a loaf of bread to your grocery store. I just got word from a contact at a primary entry point station. These are the special radio stations FEMA equipped to survive a nuclear or solar emergency. They have hardened equipment and huge fuel reserves for their generators. They are the National Public Warning System. If you can't hear me, try to find one of them on the AM band. They are the government's last line of communication when the satellites and the internet are gone. In 2012, we almost lost it all. A solar superstorm, just as big as the Carrington event, crossed Earth's orbit. NASA says if it had hit us, the economic cost would have exceeded $2 trillion. We missed it by a week. A week's worth of planetary rotation was the only thing between us and the end of the modern world. We've been living on borrowed time for over a decade. And tonight, the debt is finally.
I'm thinking about the water pumps. Most people don't realize that when the power goes, the water stops shortly after. The reservoirs rely on electric pumps to keep the pressure up. If you haven't filled your bathtub and every container you own, do it now. Once the pressure drops, the water in the lines can become contaminated. This isn't just a blackout anymore. It's a survival situation. Clean water is going to be worth more than gold by morning.
There's a strange sound coming from outside. It's not the wind. It's the sound of thousands of transformers humming and buzzing as the GICs surge through them. It's a low-frequency vibration you can feel in your teeth. NERC, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, has standards for this, but no one knows if the current infrastructure can handle a G5 extreme storm. We are the test subjects in a physics experiment conducted by the sun. I heard a report that the National Public Warning System stations are starting to struggle. Even with their hardening, the sheer scale of this geomagnetic disturbance is overwhelming. If the PEP stations go down, there is no plan B. We will be back to the era of the Pony Express, except we don't have the horses. We are a high-tech society that has forgotten how to live without a pulse of electricity to guide us. My friend Yusuf called me right before the towers went down. He was in Chicago, and he said the sky was so bright with auroras that people were out in the streets taking pictures, thinking it was a light show. They didn't realize the lights were the funeral pyre of the power grid. By the time the transformers started exploding, it was too late to get home. Now he's trapped in a city of millions with no way to get out. It's 3 a.m. The temperature is dropping and the furnace won't kick on. Even if you have gas, the igniter and the blower motor need electricity. We're going to see just how well insulated our modern homes really are. If you have a wood stove or a fireplace, you're the lucky ones tonight. For everyone else, it's time to break out the camping gear and the heavy blankets. We're going to have to huddle together to stay warm. The NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center has officially categorized this as a G5 extreme event. That's the highest level on their scale. At this level, they expect widespread voltage control problems and grid system blackouts. Some grid systems may experience complete collapse or blackouts. We aren't just looking at a few blown fuses. We are looking at the total failure of the electrical foundation of the Western world. And the sun isn't done yet. I'm checking the shortwave bands again. There's a guy in rural Montana who says he's seeing the aurora as far south as the Gulf Coast. That means the storm is so intense, it's pushing the magnetic shield of the Earth to its breaking point. When the aurora reaches the tropics, you know the atmosphere is being hammered by high-energy particles. It's like the Earth is being sandblasted by the sun's corona. I wonder what the astronauts on the ISS are seeing. They're above the atmosphere, right in the path of the radiation. NASA has protocols for this. They retreat to the most shielded parts of the station. But even there, they must be seeing flashes of light in their eyes as cosmic rays hit their retinas. They are the ultimate observers of this catastrophe, watching the planet they call home go dark,
one continent at a time. The silence is the hardest part. No hum of the refrigerator, no distant drone of traffic, no chirping of digital devices. Just the sound of your own breathing and the occasional crackle of the radio. It's a heavy silence. It feels like the world is holding its breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. We've spent our lives surrounded by noise, and now that it's gone, the quiet is deafening. I'm thinking about the data centers. All our photos, our memories, our collective knowledge, it's all stored on servers that require massive amounts of cooling and power. If their backup systems fail, we could lose a decade of human history. We've moved from paper to pixels, forgetting that pixels are ephemeral. If the drives fry or the cooling fails, the cloud just evaporates. We might be the first generation to leave no records behind. I've got a small hand-crank flashlight here. It's a cheap plastic thing, but right now, it's the most reliable piece of technology I own. There's a lesson in that. The more complex a system is, the easier it is to break. We built a world of incredible complexity, and the sun just showed us how fragile it really was. Maybe when this is over, we'll start building things that don't need a global network to function. This is 104.3 FM. The battery is at 10%. I can feel the signal starting to drift. If you're still listening, thank you for being there. It's been a long night, and the dawn is still hours away. But remember, the sun is just a star, and we are the children of stars. We've survived worse than this. Keep your radios close. Keep your hearts open. This is the last frequency. Signing off. For now. The battery is holding steady for now, but the silence from the federal government is what really worries me. We were told the National Public Warning System was built for this. It consists of specially equipped primary entry point radio stations designed to keep broadcasting during a nuclear or solar emergency. But I haven't heard a peep from the PEP station in the next county. Either their hardened equipment failed, or there's no one left to man the microphones. I keep thinking about 1989. It only took 92 seconds for the entire Hydro-Quebec grid to collapse. 6 million people lost power in less time than it takes to boil an egg. That was a warning shot from the sun that we largely ignored because it was localized. We patched the holes and went back to sleep, thinking our modern transformers could handle the next one. We were wrong. The science behind this is terrifyingly simple. When the solar wind hits our magnetic field, it induces currents right into the ground. These geomagnetically induced currents, or GICs, flow through the Earth and look for the path of least resistance. They find it in the grounded neutrals of our high-voltage transformers. Once inside, that DC current saturates the core, causing the copper windings to melt into a useless heap of slag. If we lose the big EHV transformers, we aren't talking about a few days of darkness. These things are the size of a house and weigh hundreds of tons. They aren't sitting in a warehouse somewhere. They are custom built, often overseas, with a lead time of 18 months or more. Without them, the backbone of the American grid is snapped. You can't just flip a switch and bring the lights back when the hardware has melted. Back in 2012, we almost faced this exact scenario. A solar superstorm, every bit as powerful as the Carrington event, tore through Earth's orbit. If it had happened just 1 week earlier, it would have hit us head-on. Analysts later estimated the economic cost would have exceeded $2 trillion. We didn't get prepared after that near miss. We just got lucky. And tonight, our luck finally ran out. The Department of Homeland Security has been warning about this for years. Their strategy to protect the homeland against EMPs and geomagnetic disturbances highlighted how a continental-scale event could disable our telecommunications backbone. They knew the fiber optic repeaters and the switching centers were vulnerable. They wrote the reports, they filed the papers, but they couldn't move fast enough to harden a nation that runs on thin glass and electricity. It's not just the lights. The GPS satellites up there are screaming. The ionosphere is so disturbed that the timing signals are failing. Aviation and maritime transport rely on that precision to move goods and people. Without GPS, planes are grounded and ships are blind in the water.
We've built a global supply chain that depends on a synchronized clock in space, and the sun just smashed the watch.
I remember reading about the Carrington event of 1859. Back then, the only high-tech system we had was the telegraph. The wires sparked so much they set the stations on fire. Some operators found they could unplug the batteries and keep sending messages using only the celestial electricity in the air. We've come a long way since the telegraph, and that's exactly why we're in so much more trouble now.
The Integrated Public Alert and Warning System, or IPAWS, was supposed to be our lifeline. It's the system that sends those loud blares to your cell phone. But cell towers only have a few hours of backup power. Once the batteries in the base stations die, the network goes dark. If you didn't get the alert in the first 10 minutes, you might never get it at all. The grid is the heart, and the towers are the nerves. I'm looking out the window of the studio. The sky isn't black. It's a bruised, shimmering purple. It's beautiful, in a way that makes your skin crawl. That glow is the sound of the atmosphere burning under the weight of the sun's anger. It feels like we're living inside a giant neon tube. I wonder if this is what the end of the world is supposed to look like. Not a bang, but a silent, colorful glow. Water is going to be the next problem. Most city pumps run on electricity. Even if you have a gravity-fed system, the treatment plants need power to scrub the toxins. If the taps go dry, the clock starts ticking for real. A human can go weeks without food, but only days without clean water. If you haven't filled your bathtub in every container you own, do it now while the pressure still holds. I've heard reports of small-scale fires in the industrial district. It's the same thing that happened in 1859. The induced current is so strong, it's causing electrical panels to arcing. We're seeing fires start in buildings that don't even have their power turned on. The ground itself is electrified. You can't hide from a disaster that's coming up through the floorboards and the foundations of your home. The North American Electric Reliability Corporation, or NERC, has standards for these disturbances. They require utilities to have plans for GICs, but those plans rely on being able to shed load and balance the grid. When the storm hits this fast and this hard, there's no time to balance anything. It's a cascading failure. One substation trips, overloading the next, and the whole house of cards comes down in a matter of seconds. I'm thinking about my neighbor, Hector. He's a diabetic. He needs his insulin kept cold. Without a refrigerator, he has a few weeks at best. There are millions of people just like him, whose lives depend on the cold chain and the pharmacy delivery trucks. The disaster isn't just the darkness, it's the slow-motion collapse of the medical support system we all take for granted. We're about to see how much we rely on one another. The radio is my only window now. I'm scanning the frequencies, looking for a voice, a signal, anything. Most of what I hear is just the roar, the storm, a static that sounds like 1,000 voices screaming at once. It's the sound of the sun's radiation hitting the ionosphere. It's a reminder that we are very small, and the universe is very, very big. We're just ants on a rock, hoping the light doesn't burn us. I've got a stack of old paper maps on the desk. They're dusty and the edges are frayed, but they don't need a satellite to tell me where I am. We're going to have to learn the old ways again. How to read a compass, how to preserve food without a freezer, how to talk to our neighbors without a screen. It's going to be a hard road, but maybe it's a road we needed to find again. They called this Operation Solar Silence in the drills. The idea was to see if the government could maintain continuity if the digital world vanished. The results were always classified, which tells you everything you need to know. They knew we weren't ready. They knew the just-in-time delivery system would fail within 48 hours. Now we're living the simulation, but there's no reset button this time. If you can hear this, you are the resistance, not against a government or an army, but against the despair of the dark. Keep your lanterns low and your spirits high. Check on the elderly on your block. Share what you have, because what you have won't mean much if there's no one left to share it with. We are the stewards of the light now, even if it's just a candle in a window. The wind is picking up outside. It's a cold wind, carrying the smell of ozone and damp earth. I'm going to stay here as long as this car battery holds a charge.
I'll keep talking until the transmitter dies or my voice gives out. You aren't alone out there. We're all sitting in the dark together, waiting for the sun to set on this storm and rise on a new world. Stay strong. This is 104.3 FM, the last frequency in the valley. The needle is dropping. The static is winning. But remember, the stars are still there, even if we can't see them through the glow. We've been through the dark before, and we found our way back to the light. We'll do it again, one day at a time. This is your host, signing off. Good night, and good luck to us all. The Department of Homeland Security has long warned about the specific threat of a high-altitude electromagnetic pulse, or HEMP. While a solar storm is a natural event, the physics of how it interacts with the power grid is chillingly similar. A HEMP could damage sensitive electronics across a continental-scale area, potentially disabling the entire telecommunications backbone in a single microsecond, leaving the nation blind and deaf. The vulnerability lies in the very nature of our modern lives. The North American Electric Reliability Corporation, or NERC, monitors the flow of power across state lines, but they are fighting a battle against physics. Geomagnetically induced currents flow through the ground and enter the power grid through grounded neutrals in high-voltage transformers. Once inside, they saturate the core, leading to catastrophic heating and failure. I just received a brief, garbled transmission from a ham radio operator in Maine. He says the aurora is so bright it's casting shadows on the ground like a full moon, but it's not beautiful to him. It's a warning. He reported that his shortwave equipment started smoking even when it was turned off. That's the induction at work. The air itself is becoming a conductor. If you are just tuning in to 104.3 FM, I am broadcasting from a basement in the valley using a car battery and a prayer. The sky outside has turned a bruised purple, and the silence is the loudest thing I've ever heard. No planes overhead, no hum of the refrigerator, no distant highway noise. Just the sound of my own breath and the crackle of this dying frequency. In 2012, a solar superstorm narrowly missed Earth by only a week's margin in its orbit. NASA researchers who analyzed the event later stated that if that flare had hit us, we would still be picking up the pieces today. The economic cost alone was estimated to exceed $2 trillion. We didn't get smarter after 2012. We just got lucky. And tonight, our luck finally ran out. The National Public Warning System is supposed to be our shield. It consists of specially equipped primary entry point radio stations designed to keep broadcasting even during a nuclear or solar emergency. But I've been cycling through the AM dial for an hour, and I'm not hearing the government. I'm hearing static. It makes you wonder if the shield was ever really there, or if it just wasn't enough. I remember reading a FEMA fact sheet about the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System, or IPAWS. It's a marvel of modern engineering, capable of sending alerts to every cell phone in the country simultaneously. But IPAWS relies on the cellular backbone and the internet. When the routers fry and the towers lose their fiber optic links, that high-tech warning system becomes a billion-dollar ghost. It's 3:14 a.m. now. The temperature in here is dropping. I'm thinking about the people in high-rise apartments in Chicago or New York. Without power, the pumps that move water to the upper floors stop. The elevators are frozen in their shafts. A city of millions can become a trap in less than a day. If you're in a building like that, find a way to the ground floor while you still can. NASA's history records the Carrington event of 1859 as the gold standard for solar disasters. Back then, the only high-tech system we had was the telegraph. It failed spectacularly, with operators reporting sparks flying from their machines and paper catching fire. Today, we have replaced copper wires with microchips that are 1,000 times more sensitive. We haven't built a more resilient world. We've built a more fragile one. I've got a caller on the line, or I did. A woman named Aisha from a small town in Ohio. She said the transformers down her street were exploding like blue fireworks. She was crying, asking if the water was still safe to drink. The line cut out before I could tell her to fill her bathtubs. If you're listening, Aisha, fill every container you have. The pressure will be gone by morning. The NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center uses a G scale to measure these storms. G1 is a minor disturbance. G5 is extreme. We passed G5 3 hours ago. At this level, the NOAA warns of complete grid collapse and major damage to transformers. This isn't a blackout that gets fixed in a few days. This is a structural failure of the machinery that keeps 300 million people alive. GPS is gone. The National Coordination Office for Space-Based Positioning, Navigation, and Timing has warned for years about ionospheric disturbances. Right now, the satellites are still up there, but the signals they send are being bent and scattered by the solar wind. Aviation and maritime transport are at a standstill. Somewhere out in the Atlantic, ships are drifting, unable to find their way home. In 1989, the Hydro-Quebec grid collapsed in just 92 seconds. 6 million people lost power because of a storm much smaller than the one hitting us now. That event was a wake-up call that the world slept through. We learned that the grid has no brakes once a geomagnetic current starts flowing. It's a physical surge that ignores every circuit breaker we've built. My car battery is showing 11 volts. The transmitter is getting warm, and the smell of hot dust is filling this small room. I've got a photo of my brother, Yusuf, on the desk. He's a lineman for the electric company. I know he's out there right now, probably standing in front of a substation that's humming like a jet engine. He always said the grid was held together by duct tape and hope. We are seeing the digital blackout in real time. It starts with the internet. The backbone routers lose sync, and the websites we live our lives on simply vanish. Then the cellular networks fail, as the backup batteries at the base stations run dry. Finally, the landlines go. We are being pushed back into a world where your voice only carries as far as you can yell. The U.S. Geological Survey has mapped the areas most at risk from these currents. It turns out the geology beneath our feet matters. Some rocks conduct electricity better than others, funneling the sun's fury directly into the urban centers above. If you live in a region with igneous rock, you're in the crosshairs. The very ground you stand on is helping the storm destroy the wires. I'm looking at a hand-crank lantern I bought years ago as a joke. It's not a joke anymore. That little plastic crank is the difference between seeing the stairs and falling down them. We've spent decades buying things that need a plug. Tonight, the most valuable things in the world are the things that don't need a signal or a socket. A box of matches is worth more than a Tesla right now. The silence from the government is the most terrifying part. No emergency alert system tones, no presidential address, no instructions. It suggests that the continuity of government plans are failing, or that they've retreated to bunkers like Mount Weather, leaving the rest of us to figure it out. If the people in charge are hiding, you know the situation is beyond their control. If you can hear me, start thinking about community. You can't survive a year of darkness alone. Find the people on your street. Inventory what you have. Someone has a wood stove. Someone has a well. Someone knows how to fix a wound. The rugged individualist is a myth. We survived the last ice age because we huddled together. It's time to huddle again. The battery is almost gone. The light on my console is flickering, a dim red heartbeat. I've said what I can. The rest is up to you. Keep your radios tuned to 104.3 FM. If I can find another battery, I'll be back at dawn. Until then, look to the stars. They've guided us through every dark night in human history. They'll guide us through this one too. This is the last frequency. Good night. The primary entry point radio stations were supposed to be our lifeline. These hardened facilities are designed to withstand a massive pulse, shielded by copper mesh and thick concrete. But their range is limited when the ionosphere is screaming. The National Public Warning System is a masterpiece of engineering that assumes the atmosphere will cooperate. Tonight, the atmosphere is our greatest enemy, refracting our signals into the void.
I remember reading a FEMA report about the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System, or IPAWS. It's a sophisticated web connecting cellular towers, satellite radio, and local broadcasters. It was built for hurricanes and localized terror threats. Nobody ever truly tested how it would handle a continental-scale surge that melts the very fiber optic cables that carry the go signal. The system is only as strong as its weakest wire. Back in 2012, the sun threw a massive superstorm right across Earth's orbit. We missed it by just 9 days. If that flare had hit us, analysts at NASA estimate the economic damage would have topped $2 trillion. That is not just a number on a screen. That is the total collapse of global trade, the end of insurance, and the evaporation of every digital bank account in existence. The North American Electric Reliability Corporation, or NERC, has spent years studying geomagnetically induced currents. These GICs are silent killers. They don't strike like lightning. They flow through the ground, seeking the path of least resistance. That path is usually the neutral grounding of a massive high-voltage transformer. Once they enter, they saturate the magnetic core, causing the transformer to vibrate until it literally cooks itself from the inside.
In the 1850s, the world was connected by the telegraph. During the Carrington event, operators reported that their machines worked even after they disconnected the batteries. The air itself was so charged with electricity that the wires drew power from the aurora. Some telegraph stations even caught fire, the paper ribbons igniting under the intense heat. We are seeing that same ghost power in our lines tonight, but our machines are far more fragile.
A high-altitude electromagnetic pulse, or HEMP, is the nightmare scenario the Department of Homeland Security warns about. While a solar storm is a natural surge, a HEMP is a targeted strike. Both result in the same outcome. The telecommunications backbone is shattered. We have built a world that requires nanosecond synchronization to function. Without that timing, the water pumps stop, the gas lines close, and the lights go out forever. The NOAA Space Weather Prediction Center uses a G scale to categorize these storms. We are currently at a G5, the extreme level. At this stage, the scale stops. There is no G6. G5 means widespread voltage control problems and protective system failures. It means the GPS satellites you rely on for navigation are likely experiencing uplink errors or total clock drift. The sky is no longer a reliable map. It is a wall of noise.
I'm looking at the streetlights through the window. They're glowing a strange, sickly violet color before they pop. That's the gas inside the bulbs reacting to the atmospheric charge. It's beautiful in a terrifying way. It reminds me that we are just guests on a planet that is constantly being bombarded by a star. We've spent a century pretending we were in control, but the sun just reminded us who the landlord is.
My neighbor Hector just knocked on the door. He's a veteran, and he brought over a manual typewriter. He said if the computers never come back, we'll need a way to print news for the neighborhood. It's funny how fast we revert to the mechanical. The clicking of those keys sounds like a heartbeat in this silent building. We are becoming a society of paper and ink again, 1 hour at a time.
The ionospheric disturbance is messing with more than just the radio. The National Coordination Office for Space-Based Positioning warns that aviation and maritime transport are now effectively blind. Planes in the air are trying to land using visual flight rules, but with the clouds and the lack of runway lights, it's a gamble. Somewhere over the Atlantic, ships are drifting, their captains staring at dead screens, wondering where the horizon went.
If a transformer's copper windings melt, it can't just be fixed with a soldering iron. These units weigh hundreds of tons and are custom built. There isn't a warehouse full of spares waiting to be shipped. It takes months, sometimes years, to manufacture a single one. If the storm takes out enough of them, we aren't looking at a blackout of days. We are looking at a blackout that lasts for a generation.
I can hear the wind picking up outside. Or maybe it's not the wind. Maybe it's the sound of the world slowing down. Without the hum of air conditioners and the roar of traffic, you can hear things you never noticed. The creaking of the building, the sound of your own breath. The silence is heavy, like a physical weight pressing against the glass. It's the sound of the 21st century coming to a halt.
NASA's history records from the Carrington event mention that auroras were seen as far south as Cuba and Hawaii. People in the Rocky Mountains woke up in the middle of the night thinking it was morning because the sky was so bright they could read the newspaper. Imagine that, a light so intense it tricks the birds into singing at 2 a.m. Tonight, that light is back, but it brings a different kind of dawn. The DHS strategy for protecting the homeland against EMPs suggests that we should have hardened our infrastructure decades ago, but hardening costs money, and money requires a functioning economy. We chose efficiency over resilience. We built a just-in-time world where food is delivered exactly when it's needed. But when the GPS dies and the trucks stop, just-in-time becomes never again. The shelves will be empty by tomorrow afternoon. I just checked the car battery again. 10.8 volts. It's dropping faster now. I'm going to have to start turning off the studio lights and broadcasting in the dark. It's fitting, I suppose. A voice in the dark for a world in the dark. I wonder if anyone is recording this, if there will be any record of these final hours, or if my words are just vibrating into the ether and disappearing forever.
In Quebec, back in '89, the grid collapse happened so fast, the operators didn't even have time to react. The relays tripped in a domino effect that spanned the entire province. They were lucky, it was only 6 million people. We are looking at 300 million. The scale of the failure is so large, it defies the imagination. We are not just losing power, we are losing the ability to generate it again.
I'm thinking about the water. Most city water systems rely on electric pumps to keep the pressure up. Once the backup generators run out of diesel, and that won't take long, the taps will go dry. If you haven't filled your bathtub yet, do it now. Use every container you have. Water is life, and in 3 days, it will be the most valuable currency on the planet. Don't wait for the government to tell you.
There's a strange comfort in the analog. I have a wind-up watch on my wrist. It doesn't care about solar flares. It doesn't care about the grid. It just keeps ticking, 1 second at a time. It reminds me that time hasn't stopped, even if our way of life has. We are moving into a slower era, an era where we measure distance in miles walked, not minutes driven. Maybe we were moving too fast anyway. I can hear a siren in the distance. It sounds lonely. It's probably an ambulance that can't reach the hospital, or a fire truck hitting toward a blaze it can't extinguish. The first responders are the heroes of tonight, but they are fighting a war with broken weapons. Without radio contact, they are just individuals in red and white trucks, wandering through a maze of dark streets. God bless them. The sun is a star, and stars are volatile. We live in the atmosphere of a nuclear furnace, protected by a thin magnetic shield. Tonight, that shield is bucking and folding under the pressure. It's a reminder of our place in the universe. We are small. We are fragile. But we are also stubborn. We've survived catastrophes before, and we will survive this one. We just have to remember how to be human without the machines. I'm looking at the streetlights outside the studio window. They're flickering in a rhythmic pulsing way I've never seen before. It's not a loose wire. It's the Earth itself breathing electricity into our wires. The USGS warns that these induced currents don't just trip breakers, they melt the very copper inside the massive high-voltage transformers that anchor our civilization. Once those melt, there is no turning the power back on. You have to build a new one, and that takes years. I remember reading a report from NERC about the grounded neutrals in our power grid. It's the ultimate irony. The safety systems we built to protect against lightning are the very doorways this solar storm is using to destroy us. The geomagnetically induced currents flow through the ground, find our copper wires, and surge upward. We built a giant antenna across the entire continent, and tonight the sun is finally broadcasting its full power directly into our homes. If you're listening on a handheld radio, keep the volume low, save your batteries. FEMA's National Public Warning System was designed for this, a network of primary entry point stations built to survive the initial pulse.
I'm one of the lucky ones with a reinforced transmitter, but even this gear has a shelf life when the sky is screaming. If you lose my signal, don't panic, just keep scanning the dial. Someone, somewhere, will still be talking.
I just lost the feed from the National Coordination Office for Space-Based Positioning. That means the GPS satellites are officially unreliable. But ionospheric disturbances are so thick the signals can't get through. Think about what that means for a second. Every cargo ship at sea, every plane in the air, and every automated system that relies on precision timing is now blind. The world's clock just got smashed, and we're all drifting in the dark.
Back in 2012, a solar superstorm almost exactly like this one missed us by just 9 days. If the Earth had been a little further along in its orbit, we would have been hit by a plasma cloud moving at millions of miles per hour. Analysts at NASA estimated the economic cost would have topped $2 trillion. We dodged a bullet then, but tonight, our luck finally ran out. The sun doesn't care about our economy or our 9-day head start.
It's getting colder in here. The HVAC system died 20 minutes ago. I'm wrapping a wool blanket around my shoulders while I talk. It's funny, we spent billions on fiber optics and 5G, but tonight the most important things I own are a car battery, a piece of copper wire, and a heavy blanket. We've been stripped back to the basics in a matter of hours. The high-tech dream is over. The long, cold reality has begun.
I keep thinking about the 1989 Quebec collapse. It took less than 2 minutes for the entire province to go dark. 92 seconds. That's all it took to dismantle a modern society. People were trapped in elevators, subways stopped in their tracks, and the heat went out in the dead of winter. We always think we have time to prepare, but the sun moves at the speed of light, and the collapse moves even faster. There's a smell of ozone in the air now. It's sharp, metallic, like the air right before a thunderstorm. But there's no rain coming. It's the smell of the atmosphere being cooked by solar radiation. The NOAA G scale calls this a G5, extreme. That's the highest it goes. There is no G6. We are off the charts, experiencing an event that happens once every few centuries. We just happen to be the ones standing here when the clock hit 0. I'm hearing reports, well, rumors really, of fires starting in older buildings. The Carrington event in 1859 did the same thing to telegraph offices. The wires got so hot they set the wallpaper on fire. Even with the batteries disconnected, the telegraphs kept working because the air itself was charged. Imagine your phone charging itself until it explodes in your pocket. That's the kind of energy we're dealing with tonight. Everything with a wire is a potential fuse. I've got a name for you. Youssef. He's a listener down in the valley who managed to get through on a CB radio before the static got too loud. He said he's been sharing his wood stove with 3 families on his block. They're taking turns cooking whatever is in their freezers before it spoils. That's the headline tonight. Not the fire, not the darkness, but the people who refuse to let the darkness win. Stay like Youssef. Be the neighbor someone needs. The DHS warns that a high-altitude EMP, or a major solar storm, could disable the telecommunications backbone for months. Think about your life without the internet. No banking, no logistics, no way to call for help. We've offloaded our entire collective memory to the cloud, but the cloud is just a series of servers in a warehouse, and those servers need cooling and power. When the fans stop spinning, the cloud evaporates. We are losing our history in real time. If you can hear me, and you have a vehicle built before the 1980s, you might have the only working transport in the county. The older mechanical systems don't have the sensitive microchips that the DHS says are vulnerable to these pulses. A 1974 truck might be the most valuable machine on Earth right now. If you have one, use it wisely. Help the elderly, move water, be the lifeline for your community. The age of the machine is over. The age of the tool has returned.
I'm looking at a photo of my daughter on the desk. She's 300 miles away at college. I want to believe she's okay. I have to believe she's okay. The silence is the hardest part. It's not the lack of light. It's the lack of knowing. Every parent listening to this right now is feeling that same hollow ache in their chest.
We are all separated by a sea of static. All we can do is hold our ground and wait for the sun to set.
The National Public Warning System is our last line of defense. FEMA designed these stations to be the primary entry point for a reason. They knew a day might come when the satellites failed and the internet went dark. I'm proud to be a part of it, even if I'm just a guy with a car battery and a microphone. As long as this transmitter is warm, you aren't alone. We are the last frequency, and we aren't going anywhere until the lights come back.
We need to talk about the disaster dominoes. It starts with the power, then the water, then the cell towers. But the most dangerous domino is the loss of trust. When people don't know what's happening, they fear the worst. They start seeing enemies in their neighbors. Don't let that happen. The sun is the enemy tonight, not the person next door. Keep your head, keep your heart, and keep your doors locked, but your hands open.
NASA notes that the 1859 storm was so powerful it produced auroras that were bright enough to cast shadows. Think about that. Shadows at midnight, cast by a storm 93 million miles away. It's a terrifying beauty. If you can, step outside for just a moment and look up. See the power of the universe. It's a reminder that we are guests on this planet, and tonight, the landlord is remodeling. My car battery is at 10.2 volts. The signal might start to waver soon. If I fade out, just know that I've been honored to spend these hours with you. This isn't just a broadcast, it's a vigil. We are sitting together in the dark, waiting for the first light of a very different world. Whatever happens when the sun comes up, we face it together, one breath at a time, one day at a time.
Remember the basics. Boil your water. Stay off the roads. They're just parking lots for dead cars now. Keep your radios tuned to the lower frequencies. They travel further in this mess. And most importantly, keep your humanity. We've been here before, in the days before electricity, and we found a way to build a world. We can do it again. The tools are different, but the people are the same.
The sky is starting to change. The greens are turning to a deep, bruised purple. It's beautiful and horrible all at once. I'm going to stay on as long as the battery holds. This is 104.3 FM, broadcasting from the heart of the silence. If you can hear this, you are the resistance. You are the survivors. Keep your receivers on. Keep your fires burning. I'll see you on the other side of the night.
The signal is dropping. I can hear the hum of the transformer outside finally giving up. It's a long, low moan, like a giant dying. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being there. This is the last frequency still broadcasting. We are going dark now. Good luck, everyone. God bless. Over and out. I just lost the signal from the relay in Harrisburg. That makes 5 stations in the last 20 minutes. It's like watching a string of lights being snuffed out by an invisible hand. The DHS warned us about this in their EMP strategy reports. They knew a continental-scale event would disable the telecommunications backbone, leaving us isolated in our own towns. It's one thing to read it on a white paper. It's another to hear the static take over. Let's talk about the copper. The U.S. Geological Survey has spent years studying how solar storms drain the electrical grid. When those geomagnetically induced currents hit, they don't just trip a breaker. They flow through the ground and enter the transformers through the grounded neutrals. The copper windings inside literally melt. You can't just flip a switch to fix a melted transformer. You have to build a new one, and right now, the factories are dark too. I remember reading about 1989. It only took 92 seconds for the Hydro-Quebec grid to collapse. 6 million people lost everything in less time than it takes to boil a pot of water. That was a warning shot from the sun that we simply ignored. We built more satellites, more complex grids, and more fragile systems. We traded resilience for efficiency, and tonight, the bill for that trade has finally come due, with interest. I've got a caller on the line, or I did. It was a woman named Imani from outside Philadelphia. She said the sky there wasn't just green, it was a pulsing, angry red. She was crying because her husband's oxygen concentrator stopped when the backup battery died. That is the reality of the G5 extreme level storm the NOAA warns about. It isn't just a light show, it's a life and death struggle for the most vulnerable among us. Think about the 2012 superstorm. NASA says it narrowly missed Earth by only a week's rotation. If that CME had hit us, analysts estimate the economic cost would have exceeded $2 trillion. We dodged a bullet then, but you can only play Russian roulette with a star for so long. The sun doesn't care about our economy or our trillion-dollar losses. It just breathes, and we happen to be in the way of its exhale. The GPS satellites are likely the next to go, if they haven't already. The National Coordination Office for Space-Based Positioning explains that ionospheric disturbances wreak havoc on those signals. It's not just about losing your way on a road trip. It's about maritime transport and aviation. Pilots are flying blind tonight, and ships are drifting without a digital North Star. We've forgotten how to navigate the world with our eyes and a paper map. The NERC, the North American Electric Reliability Corporation, has standards for these geomagnetic disturbances. They require utilities to have plans. But plans in just paper when the GICs start flowing through the crust of the Earth itself. The very ground beneath your feet is carrying the surge tonight. It's coming up through the basement, through the pipes, through the wires. There is nowhere to hide from a planet that has become a giant conductor. I'm looking out the studio window at the streetlights. They're doing this strange rhythmic flickering, like a heartbeat. It reminds me of the telegraph operators in 1859. They reported that their machines were working even after they disconnected the batteries. The air itself was so charged with electricity that the wires lived on their own. We are surrounded by a ghost of power that we can't control and can't turn off. The National Public Warning System stations like this one were hardened for a reason. FEMA equipped us with shielding and backup generators to survive a high-altitude EMP. We are the primary entry points. If the government still exists in a bunker somewhere in Virginia, this is the only way they can talk to you. But so far, the emergency line is silent. It's just me, this car battery, and you. Maybe that's all we need.
I have to keep checking the acid level in this battery. It's a messy, improvised setup, but it's keeping the voice of 104.3 FM alive. It's funny, we spent billions on fiber optics and 5G, but in the end, a lead-acid box from a 2015 pickup truck is the most valuable piece of technology in the county. The analog world is reclaiming its territory, one dead smartphone at a time. I hope you found your old transistor radio.
The silence from the coast is what worries me most. Usually, I can pick up the skip from the big stations in New York or Boston on a clear night. Tonight, nothing. Just the hiss of the universe. It's like the cities have simply ceased to exist. I know they're still there. Millions of people sitting in the dark, wondering if they're the only ones left. If you're in the city, stay off the streets. Darkness brings out the best in some, but the worst in others.
We are currently in a G5 extreme storm, according to the NOAA scales. At this level, they predict complete grid collapse and major damage to transformers. This isn't a temporary outage. This is a structural failure of the modern world. We are looking at months, maybe years of recovery. The supply chains are already breaking. The trucks won't move if the pumps don't work. The food won't stay cold. We have to start thinking about tomorrow very differently.
I'm thinking about a man named Yusuf I met years ago. He was an engineer who worked on the grid. He told me the whole system was held together by prayers and duct tape. He wasn't joking. The average age of a large power transformer in this country is over 40 years. We've been running a marathon on old knees, and the sun just pushed us into a sprint. Yusuf, if you're listening, I hope you were wrong about the duct tape.
If you're just tuning in, this is the last frequency. The sky is glowing, the lights are out, and the world has gone quiet. We're talking about Operation Solar Silence, the reality of what happens when the sun decides to turn off our toys. NASA's history of the Carrington event tells us this has happened before, and it will happen again. The only difference is that in 1859, they didn't have a grid to lose. We do. I'm hearing reports, rumors really, of fires starting in large server farms. The shielding just wasn't enough for the surge. All that data, all those memories, all that digital life, just evaporating into smoke. It's a digital library of Alexandria, burning in real time. If you have physical photos, hold on to them. If you have books, read them. The era of the cloud is over, at least for now. We're back to paper and ink.
I've got enough water for 3 days in the studio. After that, I'll have to head to the creek. If you haven't filled your bathtub yet, do it now if the taps still have pressure. The pumps are electric, and the water towers only hold so much. Once they're empty, the taps go dry. It's the second domino, and it's the one that hits the hardest. You can live without TikTok, but you can't live without water. The DHS strategy for EMP protection emphasizes community resilience. That's a fancy way of saying you need to know your neighbors. Go check on the elderly couple down the street. Check on the single mom with the newborn. We are the only emergency response team left. There are no sirens coming. There are no flashing lights. Just us, the dark, and the choices we make in the next few hours.
I can hear the wind picking up outside. It's a cold wind for this time of year. Without the hum of the city, you can hear everything. The rustle of the leaves, the creak of the radio tower, the sound of your own heart. It's a lonely sound, but it's a living one. We are still here. The sun can take our power, it can take our satellites, but it can't take our will to keep going. We are stubborn creatures. NASA's 2012 report said that if the superstorm had hit, it would have taken years to replace the damaged transformers. That's the timeline we're looking at. This isn't a long weekend without power. This is a change in the way we live. We're going back to basics. We're going back to the seasons, to the daylight, to the rhythm of the earth. It's going to be hard. It's going to be painful. But we will adapt. The battery is at 9.8 volts now. The transmitter is starting to whine. I'm going to save what's left for one final message in an hour. If you can hear me, stay calm, stay warm, stay together. This is 10.4.3 FM, the last frequency in the dark. I'm going to turn the mic off for a bit to save power. Watch the sky, but don't let it scare you. It's just the universe reminding us who's in charge. The battery terminals are corroding, and the voltage is dipping toward 8. I can hear the hum of the transmitter deepening, a mechanical groan as it fights to push this signal through the ionized soup of the atmosphere. It feels like I'm trying to scream through wet wool. People ask why we didn't harden the grid years ago. Only cares about the monthly bill. I remember a report from the National Coordination Office for Space-Based Positioning. They warned that GPS isn't just for your phone's map, it's the heartbeat of our infrastructure. The timing signals that sync our cell towers and stock markets are all tied to those satellites. Right now, the ionosphere is so disturbed that those signals are bouncing like stones on water. The world has lost its sense of time, and without time, the machines don't know how to talk to each other anymore. My neighbor, a woman named Imani, came by an hour ago. She's a nurse. She was white-faced, telling me the hospital's backup generators are struggling. They weren't designed to run against a ground-induced current that's literally pushing back through the grounding wires. FEMA's National Public Warning System is supposed to keep us informed, but when the very ground beneath your feet is carrying a charge that melts copper windings, even the best-laid plans start to smoke. It's a systemic failure of the highest order. We always looked at the 1989 Quebec collapse as the worst-case scenario. 6 million people in the dark in under 2 minutes because of one solar flare. But that was a localized event. What we're seeing now is global. The 2012 superstorm that NASA said narrowly missed us, this is that storm, and it didn't miss. It's a $2 trillion disaster that no amount of money can fix because the factories that build the replacement parts are also in the dark. We've lost the tools to fix the tools. I'm looking at a paper map of the county. I haven't used one of these since I was a kid. It's strange how much we've outsourced our brains to the cloud. Without a screen to tell me where I am, I feel like a ghost in my own town. The DHS warned that a high-altitude EMP or a major solar event
would disable the telecommunications backbone, and they were right. The backbone is snapped. We're just limbs twitching in the dark now, trying to remember how to walk.
The air smells like ozone and scorched plastic. It's the smell of the 21st century burning out. I think about the Carrington event again, how the telegraph operators in 1859 saw sparks flying from their equipment. They could send messages even with the batteries disconnected, because the atmosphere itself was the battery. We have so much more to lose than they did. They lost a few days of news. We're losing the ability to keep 7 billion people fed and warm.
There's a silence out there that is heavy. It's not the peaceful silence of the woods. It's the silence of a machine that has reached the end of its life. The USGS says these geomagnetically induced currents drain the grid like a leak in a dam. Once the pressure is gone, you can't just flip a switch to bring it back. You have to rebuild the dam, stone by stone. I wonder who will be left to do the heavy lifting once the grocery store shelves are empty. I just heard a loud pop from the street. Another transformer gone. That's the sound of a neighborhood losing its last link to the modern world. Every time one of those goes, the solar silence grows deeper. The NERC standards were supposed to protect us, but the sun doesn't follow government regulations. Moment.
If you have a hand crank radio, keep cranking. If you're listening on a car stereo, watch your fuel. We don't know when the pumps will work again. This is the primary entry point station, part of the National Public Warning System, but the system is just me and this dying battery now. FEMA designed these stations to survive a nuclear blast, but the slow, grinding melt of a solar storm is a different kind of enemy. It's not a bang, it's a long, hot sizzle. I'm thinking about Aisha, a friend who lives in Chicago. She always joked that her apocalypse plan was just to stay in bed. I hope she's okay. The cities are the hardest places to be right now. When the elevators stop and the water pressure fails in a high-rise, the luxury disappears fast. The DHS strategy notes that urban centers are the most vulnerable to prolonged outages. It turns out the higher you climb, the further you have to fall when the lights go out. The NOAA G scale goes up to G5. They call it extreme. We passed that hours ago. At G5, the grid experiences widespread voltage control problems, and some grid systems may experience complete collapse or blackouts. We are in uncharted territory now. The scale wasn't built for what's happening up there. The sun is screaming, and our planet is just trying to weather the storm. It's a cosmic hurricane, and we're in a house made of glass and wires.
I have a small transistor radio here that belonged to my grandfather. It's rugged, simple, and it doesn't need a satellite to work. There's a lesson in that. We built a world that was too smart for its own good. We traded reliability for efficiency, and now we're paying the tax. The 1989 Hydro-Quebec collapse showed us how fast it happens. 92 seconds from the first surge to total darkness. You can't even say a prayer in 92 seconds.
The voltage is at 7.5. The signal is fluttering. I'm going to read a list of coordinates for emergency shelters that were established under the IPAWS protocols, though I don't know if anyone is there to open the doors. If you can hear this in the tri-state area, head to the county fairgrounds. They have old-school wells there. Water is going to be more valuable than gold by sunrise. Don't wait for a text alert. The towers are dead.
NASA scientists once said that a solar superstorm is a low-frequency, high-consequence event. That's a fancy way of saying it doesn't happen often, but when it does, it ruins everything. We spent billions on space telescopes to watch the sun, but we didn't spend the money to put capacitors on our transformers. We watched the bullet coming and forgot to put on the vest. Now the bullet is here, and it's passing through every home in the country.
I'm going to step outside for a moment to breathe. The air in here is stale. I'll leave the mic open so you can hear the silence. If you hear anything, a plane, a siren, a car, know that someone is still moving. But for now, it's just the wind. The USGS warned that these storms can drain the electrical life out of the soil itself. It's like the earth is being bled dry of its energy.
We are just passengers on a very restless planet.
Back at the mic, 6.9 volts. We're almost at the end of the line. I want to tell you about the 2012 storm again. If it had hit, analysts say we'd still be recovering today. It took us a century to build this grid, and we expected to fix it in a few weeks? That's the arrogance of the modern age. We think we're masters of nature until the sun clears its throat. Then we realize we're just ants on a very large, very hot stove.
I'm hearing a voice on the shortwave. It's faint, coming from a station in Colorado. They say the auroras are visible as far south as Mexico. That's beautiful, in a terrifying way. The Carrington event did the same. People in the Caribbean thought the sky was on fire. It's the atmosphere's way of screaming. If you can see the lights, take a moment to look. It might be the last thing you see before the world goes truly, deeply dark. FEMA's National Public Warning System was built for this, but it relies on people like me staying at the post. I'm tired, my friends. I've been talking to a ghost for hours, but I'm not leaving. As long as this battery has a single electron to give, I'll be here. Because if I stop, the silence wins. And the silence is the scariest part of Operation Solar Silence. It's the sound of a world that has forgotten how to speak. We've been here before. Not with electricity, but with fire and flood and famine. Our ancestors survived without a grid for thousands of years. We have their blood in us. We have their grit. The sun took our power, but it didn't take our humanity. When the sun comes up tomorrow, it'll be a different world, but it'll still be our world. We'll find a way to rebuild. We always do. One day at a time. One step at a time.
The battery is at 5.2. This is it. The signal is going to cut any second. This is 104.3 FM, the last frequency. If you can hear this, you are the future. Keep the fires burning. Keep the stories alive. I'll try to broadcast again at noon tomorrow if I can find a fresh battery. Until then, watch the stars and stay close to the ones you love. This is the end of the broadcast. Good night and good luck.